in the UK, where I am, over the last 10 years, that's made leadership really visible. And where leadership is done really well or really badly, that's been really public. And there's been lots where it's not been done so great. And that makes it even more front and center in people's minds.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Nick House on the podcast. So, Nick, for listeners meeting you for the first time, when you tell people at a dinner party what you actually do all day, what do you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. Apart from avoiding it because we're at a dinner party, I don't want to talk work. I tell them I'm in leadership development and get into a conversation very quickly about leadership makes all the difference. And very quickly we get into conversations about sports teams and political parties and schools and all sorts of things. So people understand that quite nicely.
So, you came to LMI in 2009 from a charity
Correct.
background. Mid credit crunch, looking back, what was the worst or the best possible time to start selling leadership development?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I avoided the high before 2008 credit crunch and then the dip, which really did affect everybody in our industry around that time. So I came in and it was just up and up and up, still challenging times. So I guess that was pretty bad. I think the best time. So yeah, that was interesting, but I sort of avoided it. I think it's got better, and even though there are many quite challenging economic situations around and investment in things like leadership development, so training, coaching, that sort of stuff is discretionary. Lots has gone on in the world over the last, well, specifically the last 10 years. And certainly in the UK, where I am, over the last 10 years, that's made leadership really visible. And where leadership is done really well or really badly, that's been really public. And there's been lots where it's not been done so great. And that makes it even more front and center in people's minds. So conversations about leadership and its importance have been relatively easier to have because more and more people have an understanding, I think, than they did when I first joined and got involved as a result of some global and local events.
Thank you for sharing. So LMI is famous for total leadership process and multisensory learning, spaced repetition, coaching over time. In plain English, what does that actually look like for a manager going through one of your programs?
Sure. Yes. What the heck does that actually mean? It's the conversation we will have all the time, and particularly in the world of AI. If I contrast it to what it's not, in the world of AI, you can get anything immediately. Any information is available. And so you could just chat with your favorite AI assistant of choice and say, what do I need to do to effectively lead my team? Or what are the strategy considerations as I develop my business or anything else like that? How do I organize my time really well? And it can come up with the ideas, the information really quickly. So this idea that information is easy to come by, but information doesn't lead to transformation. We've all got all the information we need accessible for anything we'll ever need. The total leader process, multi-sensory learning, spaced repetition, is based on this idea that change, particularly change that is about attitudes and behavior, takes time. And occasionally people in our sort of industry will stand up and go, yeah, let's just make a change, set a goal, make a change, boom, it's going to happen. Whereas most people are understanding that the human condition is such that we've built habits through conditioning with repetition over time and, years and decades often to change the way that we think and behave when it comes to leadership, leading ourselves, leading people, leading organizations. That takes a load of time. So practically, we don't run short workshops, trainings that take 1 day or 2 days or 3 days and give people a load of leadership information. We do short bite-sized sessions that are mostly discussions. What have you learned? What have you been thinking about? How's that been going? Supplemented with written and audio learning materials that we will give people a couple of weeks to go away and digest. And we'll ask them to do that at least 6 times, typically over a fortnight. So, it's like having a podcast on communication or on goal setting or motivation or whatever it might be. Listen to that half a dozen times, not just once, and then go, that was a great idea. What was it? I've listened to something else I've forgotten. Stick around with a core idea long enough that it really gets to kind of root in your mind and start to deepen into your subconscious. Like I always say, it's a bit like that annoying Christmas song that comes round and you think, I never learnt that, but it was on the radio and it's in your head. So the next Christmas comes round, you remember it when it plays in the store or wherever you hear it. So it's using multiple senses, so reading and listening, writing stuff down, good bit of old fashioned pen and paper to write stuff down. You're engaging three of your five senses, which activates different neural pathways. So all of this information, let's say around good communication, starts to deepen into your subconscious, but also into your ability to access that information when you need it, when you're in the middle of a conversation, etc. So that's really what it means. So go away for a couple of weeks, digest some ideas in multiple senses with repetition. So long enough that you come back to it and you go, I've heard this before and I've read this and my mind is starting to work on it, and then have some discussions about it. So that's the process. And then the total leader is this idea that leadership is not a one-time, one-off thing. It takes time and it's multifaceted. So examples being a bit like a golfer who's great, great driving, long shots down the middle of the fairway, but if they're rubbish on the green, they're never going to get a good score. Or an actor who's brilliant at drama and big and bold, but is not very good at those quiet, intimate scenes. You're going to limit what you can do. So you need to be a total actor or a total golfer or whatever area that you might function in. Leadership is the same. There's strategy, there's productivity, there's organization skills, there's motivation skills, all those sorts of things. And so they are four different aspects of leadership that we break down into personal productivity, personal leadership, motivational leadership, and strategic leadership. And it would take an individual typically about 2 to 3 years to go through all four of those aspects. So that, in hopefully plain English from an Englishman, is a bit of an explanation on total leader with multi-sensory learning, spaced repetition.
Where does behavior change most often break down for managers you work with? Is it in the knowing, doing, or keeping going?
Yes, lots of times things start with good intentions, and certainly most people we encounter have really good intentions to be a good leader, and they'll learn things. And we often work with people who go, "I learned something like this, or I learned exactly this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it might be," and then they just got busy because modern life throws so much at people. A
Yeah.
thousand different channels of learn this, read this, hear this, messages coming back and forth. And I sent you this 4.5 minutes ago. Have you read it? Oh, no, I haven't. I've been listening to all this and stuff. And so it's partly just the overload of so much being thrown at people. There's a statistic that came out in a leadership report by DDI in 2025. And it said that only 19% of leaders say they have enough time to fulfill their responsibilities with the depth and diligence required. So 81% of leaders, in other words, just don't have the time to fulfill their leadership responsibilities to the degree that they know they would like to. So it's that kind of thing. It's the not going back to this repetition, multisensory learning. You get so much information that you forget it. That was a great idea. I'm definitely going to do that. And then boom, 24 hours later, you've had so much else come across your path that you can't even remember what it was, let alone stick with doing it. So I think there's something just about the sheer volume of stuff. And maybe a final thought on that would be that if it's not valued in terms of what's measured and celebrated within the context that they operate. So we can say, let's make our world and let's be leaders that create a really good environment, psychological safety. We really respect and empower and support individuals. But if all I'm getting from above is the results, the sales, the output, then that's what then begins to dominate, rather than you did a really good job because your team is really happy and we've retained more staff. And actually that's had a really big impact on the bottom line, rather than just thinking about results. So the kind of what gets measured or what get that kind of thing of the results you keep, the KPIs or the tracking that you do, if that only focuses on a certain amount of things and they're very objective things, some of those more subjective leadership, what we might call kind of softer leadership skills, get pushed out.
So You've read a lot about the Mission 168, making the most of the 168 hours a week. What does the discipline behind that actually look like in your own week?
Yeah, it's interesting. It hit me a while ago. 168 hours in a week. And even if I worked 70 hours and slept as much as I'm supposed to, 8 hours a night, that's still only taking me up to 42 hours. I've still 112 hours. I've still got 56 hours in a week that's discretionary of what I do. And of course, I've got to eat and sleep and travel and all those sorts of things. But if I'm working a more sensible amount of time, then 168 hours is quite a lot. And all of those things that I want to be able to do, spend a bit more time with my kids, for example, or look after my health and do a bit more exercise or keep in touch with old friends becomes a bit more tangible and accessible. So in terms of what that looks like is having a really structured weekly plan. And we make this and we share this with our clients and anybody who will listen, really, just the value of daily, weekly, monthly planning following a set process. And on a weekly basis, that's looking at the week ahead. It's looking at the following week as well and saying, what what is critical here? That kind of A list. These are the things I must do. These are the things to do if possible. Eliminate stuff that actually isn't so important and doesn't align with your goals and priorities, and overlay that on something we call the time picture. So in practical terms, that means I've created a Google Calendar with an extra profile. You can do it in Outlook or whatever calendar, and it's a great tool to do. It's a great exercise to do. You overlay all of your kind of actual appointments with another calendar profile, and you make that your ideal week. And into your calendar there, you say, right, this is what 168 hours of perfection looks like. We're never going to achieve it, but this is the goal. This is the visualization of what I'd like to work towards. I'm going to exercise at these times. I'm going to spend this time with my family. This is when I'm going to be sleeping or socializing. We've done some of this with young people, so it's 17, 18 years old, and working around their kind of organization skills and goal setting and study and that sort of thing, and said, do this exercise, but first put in the fun stuff because you can build all the other things that you have to do around the fun stuff. So practically, it's about half an hour every week review. So I typically do this on a Sunday evening. Look at the week that's just gone. What's gone well? What's not gone as well as I'd like? What am I going to think about for the next week? What appointments are already in the calendar? Work stuff, social stuff, and just appointments with myself to keep fit and meet friends and all that sort of thing. Have neighbors around for a barbecue or whatever we might be doing, and then build it like that. So this kind of time picture, ideal week, is the basis upon which that kind of 168. And so mission 168 is just this idea of if I have to find more time for important stuff, I can, and most people can if we're really committed to doing it, and we then follow a structured process.
That's fascinating. I should actually try this myself. Is the one problem that I find is that whenever you upload the ideal week, if you do not execute on against that ideal week, you lose the, I guess, motivation to execute against it going forwards because, like, well, I haven't done it already, I might not do it again. But if you just have it as an ideal week, which is basically impossible to achieve, but an ideal, something you strive towards all the time, that's just a different mindset. I like that.
Yeah, and
Um,
you make a good point there of not getting overly down on yourself because you don't hit
yes.
it. But what you can
Yeah.
start to do is go, well, I have said that Wednesday evening I'm going to go and play five-a-side football with a group of friends, and then actually I can start to build that into my actual calendar as a recurring appointment, and now it starts to happen. And so over time, this is this kind of idea of spaced repetition again. Over time, you start to assimilate your ideal more and more into your actual, and or you change the ideal because sometimes you realize that was a bit idealistic, or actually that's not as important as this. So it's keeping it as a bit of free play that then helps you to inform what you actually do is quite a nice way of thinking about it.
Most consulting franchises die quietly. LMI is 50 years old globally. What do you think the network gets right that most don't?
Yes, and even older than 50, 65 years now, and right across the world. In 90 countries. We have colleagues all over the place in every type of culture. And I think what does LMI get right? And this is what got me into LMI 16 years ago, is the realization that here was a set of practical ideas with a process and some resources that understands human nature. It understands that I'm a complex, flawed human being. And if I'm going to learn some things and apply some things, that's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of time, and I need some process and not just material, but also coaching, those conversations, facilitation to check in, accountability, all that sort of stuff, even down to, so if somebody's going through an LMI program, and typically that would take them between 3 and 12 months normally, that they'll be engaged with any one specific LMI program, and there's 4 of those in the total leader. But you're encouraged to set a weekly business and personal goal. Share that with your LMI coach and report back. How did it go? And just that simple part of the process is phenomenal, because you are continually thinking about your life at work and outside of work, choosing something that over the next 7 days is going to make my world better. And because you know you're going to report back on it, you do that, you do it far more often than you would have done if you just kind of had the thought, or even just kept it to yourself but had written it down. And therefore you feel really good, because I'm achieving things that I've intended to do for years. And that's so often what happens with our clients. And that is completely cross-cultural. It doesn't fit within North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, wherever. It works for human beings, and wherever they are, and it's tailored, and the customization happens in every culture to make it fit. But something just that recognizes what human beings are like, rather than going, here's a load of stuff, get on with it, good luck. And we're set up for failure.
Fascinating. Let's see here. So you've been candid in case studies that single hardest part of the business is getting in front of class A prospects in a way they're actually open to it. Why is that so hard, even after 15 years and 5,000 alumni?
Yes, I think for any business, getting in front of the right people to share the story of how we might be able to help them, but more importantly, to understand their situation. And that's, that is as you've highlighted, the number one challenge. I guess, why is that challenging? There needs to be a readiness on behalf of that prospect, to have that conversation, because the way that we sell, if you like, is a coaching conversation. It's not coming, can we tell you everything we can do? It's, we've got some really interesting ideas about leadership. Here's a bit of our kind of history and credibility and the approach that we take. Would that be interesting for you to have a conversation with us? And then we'll set up those conversations, and essentially it's, tell us about your world, what's going well, what are you really pleased with, what's succeeding, and what isn't as you'd like it to be, and what would that look like if it was, and what would that mean, what impact would that have on you individually, on the team, on the business, on your world, and let's align, see what we can do that might be helpful. And that's always a kind of gradual process as we get to know a client. And then often, we have client relationships that have been 5, 10, 15 years or more across the world. So we do well once we've given people that insight. I think as well, because what people have in mind when they think about training, or they think about management training, leadership development, they have something that is a bit more akin to classic training. And we're needing to re-educate and say, actually, that might not be what you need.
Thank you, Nick, for sharing this invaluable, absolutely amazing feedback and information. Where can people find you?
People can find me on LinkedIn, Nick Howes, it's Howes, under the company page, Leadership Management International brackets UK. You'll find LMI across the world. Almost everybody listening, wherever you are, you're either in your country or close by. If you search for LMI, if you go lmi-world.com, you'll see the LMI contacts all over the world. And our UK website is lmi-uk.com.
Perfect. Thank you.